Hi, it's Kirby Summers, and this is part 2 of the Vicki Morgan and Alfred Bloomingdale expose, if you will. The reason I am spending some time on this one is because I want you to pay attention to the similarities between the Bloomingdale affair with Vicki Morgan and the Jeffrey Epstein case. So Alfred Bloomingdale had what is known as a Marquis de Sade complex. What that is a desire to inflict pain on others while having sex. And so if you recall, Epstein on his desk, when Vicki Ward went to interview him in 2003, kept a copy of the paperback by the Marquis de Sade and some other clues. He left the sort of the paperback copy of Lolita, so that there were a lot of clues that he left for people to see beyond the exterior of this, make-believe billionaire. Now, I'm going to say some things that are quite shocking here. And again, I'm not going to make direct reference to the Jeffrey Epstein case, but I want you to use your good judgment and sort of connect those dots. When Bloomingdale was having this affair with Vicki Morgan, as I discussed in part 1, he included other women that he would hire. Now, what he also did was he videotaped these sort of, locked dalliances with all these married men. Now, the married men were part of New York society. They were the most wealthy, the most powerful men. And as I also mentioned, he was very close to Ronald Reagan. And so the guys that were involved politically were connected. I'll just insert here that Ronald Reagan was also connected to Robert Maxwell. And he was also involved with William Casey, who, as you know, was the head of the CIA. So we've got all of the same characters, and frankly, we have some of the same sexual behavior. So when Betsy Bloomingdale discovered the information about Vicki Morgan, she basically told Alfred to get rid of her. It wasn't because, I'm just moving my camera here, it wasn't because she was sort of jealous. It was because she was embarrassed with her society friends. So, there's this hypocrisy of like, your husband can do what he wants, just don't embarrass me with my society friends. When, in the early days, when Bloomingdale was trying to get Vicki to trust him enough to take her back to his place, he was seen with a woman who was well-dressed, and Vicki thought, oh, she must work with him as his assistant, maybe in his office. As it turned out, this woman was a lot more than that. She was a procurer, much like Ghislaine Maxwell has been alleged, and she was also a participant. She would, be one of the women that he regularly had this very bizarre sexual encounter with, so he would beat her and she would participate with these other women for the sexual gratification of Alfred Bloomingdale. When many years into the future, going back to when Betsy discovered this and she made Alfred give her up, pretty much Vicky was left with nothing. He had made sure throughout the years to give her a certain amount of money that, while it sounds like a large amount of money, so maybe $10,000 a month, later increased to $18,000 a month, she also had to pay for everything he told her to do. So, hire security guards, wear this kind of clothing, pay this amount of money for the place where you're living. So basically, he had her on a very tight leash, although it sounds as though she was making a lot of money. The money went out as soon as it came in, and he knew that, and that's why he sort of gave her a monthly allowance, so that when that monthly allowance was taken away from her, she had no skills. And so concurrently with the situation of Betsy discovering what happened, he became ill, he had throat cancer, he was hospitalized, and of course, this is the time that Betsy Bloomingdale cut her off. She instructed his attorneys and his CPAs, hey, not one more penny for Vicki Morgan. So Vicky decided to hire an attorney and sue him. He had promised to take care of her for the rest of her life, and so she took him to court. Now, this is an interesting situation because when you take somebody to court, as you have discovered if you're following the Jeffrey Epstein case, there are going to be depositions. And in the depositions, some really inflammatory information came out. The information discussed the sexual deviancy of Alfred Bloomingdale, and it discussed names. There were names such as Ed Meese that was discussed as being part of these sex parties and sex orgies, and even Ronald Reagan and other members of the Reagan White House. So when that information became public, tapes were given to an attorney, and then when Larry Flynt discovered that there were these tapes, what he did was he made an incredible offer to buy them. Now, the tapes went missing, wouldn't you know? However, Larry Flynt was able to get his hands on some more tapes, and he showed at least, I think, one of these to someone, and really what he saw and what he was able to show, which was not discussed in mainstream media, was Ronald Reagan with a woman wearing, sort of like this, I guess, wearing an outfit and, holding a whip, and wearing a strap-on, I'm not going to say the name, but a strap-on something or other. And then later, the same couple was seen continuing what they were doing on one of the sofas. And so at some point, Vicki Morgan's attorney was invited to the White House and was given a stern lecture, basically a warning that these tapes had to remain sort of a secret, and that there had to be sort of like this whole thing had to be ended. So Vicki was not done. She started to market her book, and there, when Betsy Bloomingdale and the people at the White House got wind of this, they did everything to make sure that nobody gave her a contract, and so her book was squashed. Now, if you know my story, you know that my book, The Billionaire's Woman, a memoir, which I now have on my website, was also squashed for, decades. And it's only been recently that I've been able to put that out on my own, despite the constant attempts to take it down. It's up there. But so Vicky was sort of like making a lot of noise, and so the first thing they did was to kill the book, and then, as I described in part 1, she was bludgeoned to death in her apartment by her roommate, who confessed to being her murderer, and then he recanted and said, hey, you know what, I didn't do it. So I'm going to say that this is part 2, but there's so much more to this that I want to discuss, and I want to urge you to, when you're looking at a case like the Epstein case, to use previous cases as a comparison, because while you may not get the right answers from mainstream media on the Jeffrey Epstein case, if you compare it to something like the Vicki Morgan case or other cases outside of the realm that are a little bit more fleshed out because a lot of time has gone by, you're going to see patterns, and you'll find the answers in those patterns. Okay, well, listen, I want to thank you at this point for becoming members of my Patreon. I want to thank you for supporting me in my work and buying my books, and for following me on this new venture of podcasting. I'll figure out a way to get this done in a little bit more visually appealing context. Meanwhile, don't forget to like this and to subscribe. Okay, you have a good day, and I'll come back with part 3, which is going to include the political angle that you have been getting sort of a clue into with the Epstein case, and there's a prince involved. So that's to be continued. Okay, bye.